Hey, how's it going guys? This is Dave2D, and this is my review of the Razer Blade Stealth. So this laptop turned a lot of heads at CES because it's the dream, right? You take the flexibility of an Ultrabook and then you combine it with the power of a desktop graphics card and then you profit, right? Here's my review. Okay, inside the shipping box, you get the Razer box, and inside that you get more boxes. Inside those, you get the AC adapter in one, the Razer Blade in another, and some pamphlets. The top surface is a black anodized aluminum. It's a different material from the Razer Blade 14. This is a much smoother material that doesn't exfoliate your skin, but it shows smudges more readily. It still has a light up Razer logo up front. The bottom surface is the same material. You have some rubber strips to raise it up for airflow, and then some intake vents. You can access the internals by removing some screws. On the inside, you can see that the 8 gigs of RAM is soldered on, which is a bummer because 8 gigs is kind of sufficient now, but 16 is so much more comfortable, right? And if you're really careful, you can detach and lift up the ribbon cable here, and then you can upgrade the storage drive underneath. It's an M2 PCIe drive, and you might want to upgrade that. You'll see why in a bit. The screen is very rigid, there's very little flex. It's actually one of the stiffest screens I've used. The hinge is also really solid and well tuned. It feels durable, and you can easily open this thing with one hand. The keyboard chassis area has the slightest amount of flex, but this is just a result of how thin the device is. Overall, this is top of the line build quality. Okay, going around the sides, we have a USB-C Thunderbolt 3 port, which you can use to charge the laptop and then connect to the Razer Core, a USB 3, and a headphone jack. And on the right side, we have HDMI out and the second USB 3 port. There's an LED light up at the front to show power status, and there's no SD card slot. In terms of its relative size, we have the MacBook Air on the bottom here. It's getting a little old, but I'd consider it to be in the same class of laptop, the Razer Blade Stealth in the middle, and an XPS 13 on the top. So this unit here has a Skylake dual-core i7 running at 2.5 GHz, a Quad HD touchscreen, integrated Intel graphics, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage, and it goes for $1,000 US. Now this is the base model. They offer a 4K screen and bigger drive options, but no RAM or CPU upgrades currently. It's the same anodized metal finish on the inside, and the fingerprints are still an issue here. The keyboard has Razer Chroma, which is some next level stuff. You can basically create any kind of color combination. You can go full psychedelic, you can do cool color effects, you can color up sections of keys, individual keys, anything flies, and it's a lot of fun. The keyboard also has anti-ghosting, so you can hit a bunch of keys at once and they'll all register. The typing experience is okay. The layout is pretty good, but I wish the up arrow was higher than the left and right keys, and the keyboard doesn't feel cramped or anything, but the keys have a shorter travel than I'm used to, so it took a little while to get comfortable with it. The glass trackpad's not bad. It has an excellent texture and it's not too smooth. The button mechanism is also pretty good, but I experienced a cursor skip once in a while. It's a relatively rare occurrence, but it's there. The screen on this model is a 12.5 IGZO screen running at 2560 by 1440. The bezels are very thick for a 2016 device, but the viewing angles and the contrast are excellent. It's a glossy screen, but it is bright enough to compensate for most reflections, and it's usable in brightly lit rooms. The color accuracy on the Quad HD screen is actually very good, even for color accurate work. Now for an extra $200, there is a 4K screen option that's 100% Adobe RGB, but it does drain batteries a little bit quicker. The webcam up top is 2 megapixel, and it's pretty sharp for a webcam. The drive in here is the PM951 from Samsung, and if you've seen my other videos with PM951s in it, the smaller the drive is, the slower they are, and this 128 gig is the smallest size I've used and consequently the slowest drive I've used from this series, so my recommendation is to swap this out for a faster drive. These write speeds are really bad. In terms of gaming, lightweight games like CSGO and Dota 2, those will play at around 55 frames per second at lowest graphics settings at 1080p. If you want better frame rates, you have to drop the resolution. A more demanding game like the new Rainbow Six is still playable, but frame rates are lower at around 45 frames per second. You can sometimes hit 60 frames per second if you lower the resolution enough, but depending on the game, it's pretty tough. And hardcore 3D games like Witcher 3 or Assassin's Creed Unity run horribly on the integrated card. Now the companion to this is the Razer Core. It's an external box that you can put your video card of choice into, and then you connect your laptop to it. It's coming out soon, and there's no doubt that you'll get massively improved gaming performance by connecting the Razer Core. I am curious about that Thunderbolt 3 connection because it only pushes out around 5 gigabytes per second, so that's like 40 gigabits per second, and a desktop PCIe 3 pushes out around 16 gigabytes per second. That's a huge difference in bandwidth. I'll have to take a look. Another thing is that this is a 2-core CPU, so that can bottleneck some high-end graphics cards for some CPU-intensive games. But the last thing to keep in mind is that this is a Thunderbolt 3 connection, so theoretically, any laptop with a Thunderbolt 3 port can take the Razer Core and should theoretically be able to use it. I'm sure you'll need some like driver updates and potentially like a BIOS update from the manufacturer, but don't feel pressured into thinking that you need the Razer Blade Stealth to make this whole thing happen. But when I get it in, I will be doing a full review of it, so you should probably subscribe. Okay, it uses a 45-watt AC adapter and it charges over USB-C. It takes a little less than 2 hours to juice the battery up from 0, and under normal use I got around 6.5 hours of battery life with screen at 80% brightness, and playing games I got around 1.5 hours. Battery life on the 4K screen would obviously be shorter. The speakers are facing straight up, which I always like, but they sound pretty mediocre. They don't get very loud, the bass is definitely lacking, and it sounds tinny. The one good thing though is that even at max volume, the sound doesn't get very distorted. One of the most common complaints of the Razer Blade 14 from last year, it ran hot because packing a 970M in a super thin chassis like that is just risky business. This time around, because of that low voltage CPU and the lack of a dedicated graphics chip, it stays cool. It'll break 100 degrees in a couple hot spots, but overall, the device has comfortable thermals. It's silent at idle, and even under full load, the fans stay very quiet. Okay, the Razer Blade Stealth. It's a metal unibody chassis, very well built, really portable, 12.5-inch Quad HD touchscreen. It's a great screen, and unless you really need 4K, I'd stick with this one. The speakers are in a great spot, but they don't sound amazing. The keyboard is super cool with the lighting, but keystrokes are a little shallow. The trackpad is not bad. On the inside, the Skylake i7 is well cooled and a decent performer, but it might bottleneck some games when it's connected to the Razer Core. The 8 gigs of RAM is barely sufficient and it's soldered on, but the M2 storage is fortunately upgradable. And lastly, powering all of this is a battery that lasts around 6.5 hours of regular use. Okay, here's the thing. I don't really consider the Razer Blade Stealth as a true gaming laptop. It's made by Razer and it's got a couple cool gaming features like the light up keyboard and the anti-ghosting on the keyboard, but it's got very similar specs to say something like the XPS 13, and I would never consider that thing a gaming laptop. But what this thing is a really good Ultrabook. It's black, it's thin, it's really light, it's made by Razer, and it's really well priced, especially for a Razer product. But ultimately, you have to have this thing tethered to play games, and to me, that makes it no different from any other laptop with a Thunderbolt 3 port, so keep that in mind. That's the end of this review. I hope you guys liked it. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. It's been nice. I'll see you guys next time.